Hello. So as introduced, I'm Kevin Marchand, Director of Solution Architecture at Evertz. Myself and Dan Turo are going to cover a couple areas in the presentation. So this first portion I'm going to focus on is linear playout for OTT, direct-to-consumer streams, fast channels in the cloud. But also you'll see it covers more even traditional broadcast scenarios as well beyond those kind of things. So I'd like to start focusing on architecture, being a SMPTE meeting. What's different about the cloud? How did we kind of get to this position in technology, and what's new and coming up? So the first column on the left, traditional on-premises, you could even split that down quite a bit more, going back not too many years. You can see there's virtualization as one of those boxes, which is even quite new. So going a little further back than that first column, even there's commodity or specific custom hardware, modular cards, that kind of thing, transitioning into x86, everything becoming software. And then from that, transitioning into virtualization. So still on premises, but the move to everything being software really was one of the first big transitions that enabled this path to the cloud. The second and third column, you can see as things are becoming purely software, really from the levels that we mostly deal with, you can start offloading the infrastructure to someone else, basically. So infrastructure as a service, platform as a service is just getting into more levels of that infrastructure that are managed by somebody else, like AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure. And then getting to the far right column, software as a service is where pretty much the entire stack, including the application, is managed by a service provider or a vendor. So splitting the topic tonight a bit, there's cloud-based systems. We've deployed a number of cloud systems for years. It's not super brand new at this stage. So the thing that I'd like to focus on a bit more is the transition beyond taking a system you would have traditionally in your equipment room, even as VMs, and deploying that into AWS. We've obviously done that at scale for a lot of big channels that have been on air for years now. But going beyond that is not having to deal with even that part yourself from the customer perspective. Right? So not having to worry about operating system upgrades, virtual machines, management, things like that. With the SaaS, we push it farther, so it becomes more down that endpoint of being fully a service for the channels. We'll get into a bit more detail, but improved speed to market is one of the key reasons why you would do that and go down that road. Once things are virtualized, they're much faster to deploy than hardware, but you still have to organize things yourself before using a SaaS. So you can have virtual machines, you have to define the OS and get them spun up and things like that. If a separate company is providing all the back end and it's more of a front end operation, you can get into a mode where you click a button to spin up a new channel, which is pretty dramatic in terms of what it enables for business opportunities, things that weren't possible before. So this is where it gets into things like these bullet points, leveraging pre-established infrastructure. So something like the backend platforms, AWS, Google Cloud is just massive infrastructure that's there. The application SaaS provider on top of that layer is providing a distributed system that you can build on top. So all of that's already in place, really, as well as the tools to spin things up quickly. So you avoid this cycle of ordering things, shipping, racking them. Again, virtual machines starts to reduce this rack and stack portion, but you still need virtual machine hosts, which at some point it's always going to be a box in a rack. One of the other main reasons why you would go down this route is cost management. Depending on the company, working with various different customers, there's a preference sometimes for OpEx versus CapEx, but with this world, with a SaaS, it's really focused on OpEx, where it's pay as you go for these channels. And that's tied to the technology, where if you can click a button to spin up a whole channel and run it, and you can click a button to turn it off, it makes sense to charge pay as you go for that model. And it also reduces costs in other areas. So getting into design and support. So it doesn't have to be a full custom design every time. It's kind of flexibility that that model provides. The stuff I was mentioning, pushing a button to get a channel, sounds very simple. And it is simple from an interface point of view, but under the hood, there's a lot happening there. So that's where the SaaS model starts to differ from just pure virtual machines that you move into the cloud. Because instead of a service provider hosting virtual machine systems at large scale, we start to move into a serverless architecture, which means there's not a single virtual machine that's part of the system necessarily. It's Lambda functions, things like that. So you could run pieces of code from the cloud providers. So Amazon and Google have methods to do this. You run the Lambda function, it executes your code and returns a result, where in that case, you're not even managing the virtual machine level. That's offset as well. So that allows these automation kind of approaches to get to the point where you push a button, it triggers a whole bunch of things to happen. We could spin up servers, we could run serverless functions. A lot can happen sort of really automated that wasn't possible before. The simplicity, obviously, of adding those services. Part of the things we're focusing on, and I'm sure a lot of our friends in the industry, is templating these things more as well. Because if you want to have that kind of speed, it's always a balance with customization. So if the channel's very bespoke and there's a million little things you have to set up, it takes more time. If you can template it, for example, this is going to be a channel that goes to YouTube or Roku. But we know what they want, the bit rate, the PIDs, all that kind of stuff. So you can save it as a template, and that, again, enables the automation. So you click, I want a Roku channel. A lot of that configuration is already done, basically. So trying to get that simplicity and efficiency. It allows you to fragment, regionalize, and personalize the streams. Which again, if you're building in your own building or in your own Amazon account even, you start to add services, and then you get into scaling, which takes effort. And with a SaaS approach, you can add new channels very quickly and easily. So adding 50 channels for personalized, different micro targeting kind of approaches is very possible. And then the last two bullet points really makes it more obvious the benefits of this kind of infrastructure is that you can experiment. So if the business comes up with an idea of a kind of channel they want, before you go to engineering and it's like, well, that'll take 6 to 12 months, this much money. It's hard to spin all that up and then realize it doesn't really pan out. But what these models enable is entirely new avenues of experimentation and finding things that work. And if they don't work, you turn them off and you stop paying and you try something else. So that allows the business to experiment, focus on different approaches that maybe some of them click and you focus more effort on those. So that's also a very new kind of thing that this technology enables. This is just some examples, if you're unclear when I'm talking about a SaaS, that more people outside of specific broadcast kind of use cases are familiar with, obviously. So again, all of these products are some you've probably all used, but you interact with the product through a web browser. You don't worry about what server your file in Dropbox is sitting on. All of that is completely invisible to you. You use the Dropbox interface. You don't even think about the back end. So that's really the model we're looking at. So those things, obviously consumer applications, but applying that idea and the approach to play out in streaming. All of this is possible today. So the things I'm talking about here aren't sort of future concepts. It's things that are deployed and working. But just to show the first two columns, you can see really where there was a split before. There was traditional broadcast channels that had some peculiar kind of niche technology that is not as common for OTT channels, things like SCUDdy, conventional distribution over satellites, more complex graphics. So there was more of a split between traditional broadcast and then what you would find in a pure online channel, OTT or fast channel. So they would not have some of the more bespoke kind of technologies, but they would have different newer technologies like ad personalization, pop-up channels, again, going back to that flexibility, distribution over IP and CDN, which we are getting into obviously on-prem with 2110 and compressed, and then tie into apps. So what we're focused on, and I'm sure others, is tying those two things together. So taking the background that we have in the first slide where everything migrated to software, right? Years ago, we got away from custom hardware into x86 standard software, virtualized, went to the cloud. So that includes things like SCUDdy insertion, loudness normalization, all the traditional broadcast stuff for years we've done in just software. So packaging it in a way that works as a SaaS and combining it with the OTT kind of specific applications is what enables a much more full-featured offering that is suitable for OTT type channels and fast channels, but also suitable for traditional broadcast channels in the SaaS market or the SaaS structure and approach. This is similar to what I was talking about. Really, the top and bottom are the two kind of different paths that are basically converging, we think. So you can see traditional playout and then cloud SaaS, where the cloud SaaS was really more focused on simpler channels, VOD, AVOD kind of channels, But now it's starting to merge that technology where we can do both using the same model. And again, going to all the partners like YouTube and Roku and Fubo. And part of the thing that's important with a SaaS to have this flexibility is that list changes constantly. There's going to be a lot of new service providers that are going to pop up. Some of them will close or merge. So having things in the cloud with that level of flexibility allows the businesses, the broadcasters, to adapt very rapidly as new ones come up or close down. So a lot of revenue, obviously, attached, going beyond traditional cable and satellite into OTT, and starting to merge those things where we found customers can think of it as a single monetization across traditional broadcast and OTT or linear or nonlinear. It's starting to come together as opposed to two separate groups within the company where traditionally there was the broadcast team and then the digital team that came out of the website and they started doing channels. So starting to bring those together with a more coherent business approach. So this is just showing some of the features that is currently in the SaaS that we have, but again, I'm sure our industry friends also have very similar offerings where you can see it's not a light version or just OTT. It's pretty much everything you've done on premises for traditional broadcast is moving into this model very rapidly. Specifically for us, we're focused on linear playout and we're expanding other areas very quickly as well, but you can see a lot of these things are probably not what you would find with standard web-based playout. And one of the important things as well, as a bit on the top there, is the HTML5 UI. So again, the same as you go to gmail.com. This should be all web-based technologies for the interface, which is this. I forgot we had this next slide. So this should be a video just to animate it, but it's just an example of leveraging web technologies. I'm trying to get this to play. Okay. Yeah, so this is all in a web browser, getting away from, and again, going back years where we're starting to get into everything being software, everything being more standard common industry software. So using open source packages, like the web frameworks, Angular, JS, things like that, where you don't have to invent it all yourself. There's a huge amount of technology you can leverage. But again, you can see with this web-based interface, it's very, and this is a recording of a real system, it's not an animation, but it's very quick, very responsive. The graphics are more advanced than you would typically see with just a bug on an OTT channel. So full multi-layer DVE, multiple live inputs, even switching the input behind the graphic. So you can see there's the proper Z-axis stacking. And then controlling, these are live sources coming in. So getting live video flowing in and out of the SaaS, obviously very important. And then having the option to run commercials. So this particular interface is showing a production scenario where part of the allure, having it through a web-based technology, it's more lightweight. You could run this off of a laptop or remote or from home. And we can customize these interfaces very quickly because it's all web-based software. On the linear channel, linear playout side, you can see it's very standard looking modern linear playout automation. So if an operator is transitioning from a current system that's been on air for a number of years to this kind of platform, it's not totally different. It has the same concepts with events, event types, secondary events with SCUDdy, graphics, audio profiles, normal stuff for what everyone is used to. At the top right corner, I'll also draw your attention, there's a video playback that's actually a WebRTC output of the playout server. Because when we're getting into this kind of web-based interface, and like I mentioned, working remote, working from anywhere, you start to try to think of how you could monitor these channels if it's all somewhere far away in the cloud. So the WebRTC is sort of the first level where it's the channel's output from that playlist tied together. It's a self-contained kind of unit. Beyond that, there's also obviously multi-viewer products, like everything else, merging all into pure software, which means you can deploy those in the cloud as cloud-based multi-viewers. Various applications. So again, there's a temptation, or a lot of the time you focus on things that are already done in the cloud as SaaSes. So fast channels, pop-up channels, things like that. But also a lot of the features I was covering, like you can see it would work for traditional standard broadcast channels to a very high degree of complexity, which is available today. And one of the nice use cases that seems to have a lot of interest is disaster recovery, because that is something that, and you saw with the intro, I used to be on the customer side before Evert. So There's always the case where someone does a risk assessment and it makes sense to do a DR, but then you budget for it and it's very hard to spend a lot of CapEx up front being in a DR system and you hope you never use it, and sucks. But with this kind of approach with a SaaS, you can do pay-as-you-go DR, which is really nice. So you can have all the channels configured and ready to go in the SaaS. And then since it's pay-as-you-go, you only incur costs really if you actually use the system. If you have an emergency, then you can go over, light up the SaaS channels, which can either have full functionality to mirror the main channels, or depending on the complexity, even if you lose 10% of the features, it's still much better than Black on Air and much better than spending a large amount of money up front for a traditional DR kind of system. I mentioned the live sources. This is very important. And from the original SMPTE meeting invite for today, there's a note about challenges with the cloud. So this is really touching on the main challenge, which is packet loss. It's not your internal network, it's a public network. It's a very complex, abstracted network that's reconfiguring itself all the time. So it's, from our experience for years now, it's inevitable there's going to be some level of packet loss with video signals flowing in and out of public cloud. And these technologies are what mitigate that, SRT, ZXE, and RIST. So support for these technologies is pretty crucial, both on the way in and on the way out. We've, again, had systems deployed in the cloud for years, traditional channels that are on cable satellite. This is perfectly suitable to maintain a very robust signal. The main challenge or difference is operationally, it adds latency, because the way they work is they hold a buffer of packets, and when the packet is dropped, it has the buffer it could resend. But to hold a buffer, you have to have some seconds of time that elapse so you can build up the buffer. So usually 2 or 3 seconds. Not necessarily an issue if it's like a movie channel that runs all day, but when you get into the live channels with a lot of interaction, it's something that you have to review with the operation team to understand it may be different. So that was probably the main challenge, which isn't a huge one, but something to definitely consider. And the last slide before I hand over to Dan, reliability targets. The main thing here that's different with a SaaS is you're really focusing on an SLA. So again, the service provider is taking on a lot of the responsibility to deal with the back end. So you don't have to worry about that kind of strategic planning as much. Do I have 2 servers in different rooms and power and all that? So the focus in that area would shift more to the SLA and what's the uptime that's guaranteed from the platform, and that speaks to how the platform's managed in the back end and what they can achieve through their internal processes. So yeah, that is everything I had. And then Dan is going to go through a related discussion, and I guess we can do questions after that. Or do you want to do questions in between? Or?
I'll just read that. Or if you could, maybe do some questions now with Kevin, and then we could do, George, do you want to do? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for Kevin?
Just continuing on, our next speaker will be Dan Turo, the Vice President of File-Based Solutions for Evertz. Dan Turo is the Vice President of File-Based Solutions at Evertz. Prior to becoming Vice President of File-Based Solutions, Mr. Turo was the Senior Director of Product Development with responsibility for Evertz's server product line and its modular infrastructure product line. Prior to joining Evertz, Mr. Turo was the Director of Image Processing Products at Genum Corporation. Mr. Turo has worked on numerous cloud projects with industry leaders like Warner Brothers, Discovery, Paramount, Viacom, CBS, Fox, and others. Mr. Turo has assisted in migrating solutions from being hardware-centric to software-centric and now to cloud-native stacks. Mr. Turo has a Bachelor's of Engineering Physics degree and Master's of Business Administration degree from McMaster University.
Right. So Kevin talked a little bit about kind of what we've been doing on the kind of the whole SaaS playout side of things. Really conceptually, to a certain degree, if you think about it, that's our traditional left to right kind of workflow. There's a ton of applications for that, for traditional broadcast, for OTT, for fast channels and stuff like that. So that's kind of the left to right kind of concept. At the same time, there's a huge trend towards moving right to left. And really what I'm talking about there is kind of going into customized and data-driven interactive viewing experiences on connected devices. Really where you've got your iPhone, you've got your iPad or your connected TV, and there's something that's going on from right to left to really customize and actually make that experience better on top of the stream that you're already generating with something like Evertz.io. So what do I mean by those particular things? It's really about audience engagement, right? And really what I'm talking about is doing edge rendered graphics on your connected device, in your iPhone, in your iPad, or on your TV. And that's on top of the stream that Evertz.io may generate, or your OTT service may actually generate and serve up to the consumer. So what does that actually mean in terms of edge rendered graphics? That's stats, that's polls, that's trivia that can come up dynamically and almost personalized on your connected device, and allow people to actually also interactively engage with the content. So just on the right-hand side here, if you actually want to see, okay, you know what, I'm watching an NBA game. I want to see some stats about Kyle Lowry. Just you, not your family, you're on your phone. I can click on my phone, see the stats for Kyle Lowry get rendered on my connected device, then flip to the team stats, and then flip to the competing team stats, and really allow it to be an interactive experience for you yourself as you're kind of viewing that stream. That also comes into, it's just you yourself sometimes, but also with these technologies, you can also start to do watch parties, invite multiple people in to actually watch the game with you, interact with them, as well as watching the game, seeing stats, seeing graphics, all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, a really interesting one where I think there is a lot of monetization application is if you can actually incorporate commercial stuff into this whole flow, including betting and gaming on top of the stream that you're actually watching. And a lot of guys are starting to do this, monetize the betting subscriptions and things that people want to do while you're watching the game. So very dynamic type of application. And of course, because you're in an OTT application, you've got connected down to the individual person. You can do targeted advertising if you want, and it's part of the overall ecosystem. So how does that exactly all work? Just kind of thinking about it in terms of the way it actually works is you've actually got a stream that comes in. That's your clean feed that's getting streamed to your player itself. Then you have a graphics layer that's basically an SDK integration with the application itself, right? So that's how the graphics get on because it's an SDK integration with the application itself. And then of course, on top of that, you've got your player control, which interacts with both layers. So just as a case study in terms of what's the state of the possible, I thought I'd throw up something that we've been doing with the Yes Network in New York. So I've got a video of this, but I wanted to slow it down a little bit to talk a little bit about things in terms of what they are. And then I'll roll the video and you can see how snappy and interactive it actually is. So in your app, you've got a kind of live stat, you've got watch party. That's kind of the first step. When you click on the live stats, you get brought to another screen with a whole bunch of information that comes to you, right? You've got stats about the individual batter. In this case, it's actually up, and it tracks information about pitch 1, pitch 2, pitch 3, and shows you that information in real time as the game is actually happening. Well, how do I do that? That's really, really key to this overall thing. It's timed metadata that gets pushed down through the ecosystem to your connected device. So when something happens at the stadium, that's propagated all the way through in time with the video. So when it actually gets rendered on your device, somebody struck out, well, they just struck out and it's been lined up because it takes into account the latency of the overall stream. Trivia information can come up. You can render that stuff and see that. If you click on kind of let's say the strike zone area, okay, real-time information comes into how good was that actual pitch? How far did he miss it by? I'm interested in seeing that on a regular basis. You'll watch that, you'll click on that. Again, more interactive and keeps people in the game, watching the game longer and more intently. And then if I click on standings in that particular screen, you can see the games that are in flight. Okay, how's that other game going that I wanted to watch, but wanted to watch this one more and see how my buddy, his favorite team and how they're doing. Clicking through all these things makes it a better personalized experience for you. And then you can go say, I want to look at all the players, then see the player stats from tonight, from this season, from last season. So very much customized. And of course, and this is actually a real example that we're doing with one of our customers, presented by T-Mobile. That's that targeted advertising, that advertising application that I talked about. All this stuff can get integrated in. And this is just a video. Yeah, that's rolling fairly well. You can see how snappy it actually is when we go through the different things. Okay, there's the curveball, there's the stat, the speed. Click on the strike zone. I want to see it right away. Okay, that's fine. There was a swinging strike. Now I want to see some of the players. There's the roster. I want to go and see my standing. So very quick and very responsive as you're clicking these particular buttons. Next pitch, okay, right away almost comes up. What was that pitch? What was its speed? How was it in the strike zone? Right, I want to see the stats on that particular guy tonight, last season, and this season. Okay, so that just shows you, this is a kind of the state of the possible. People are doing this today, very responsive, very targeted. And why do we actually want to do a lot of this stuff? Well, I'll come back to it. It's really about kind of proven results for increasing viewer retention. When we actually look back at the stats and with our customers, 50% longer viewing time when they're watching you or in the app. 68% increase in poll response rate. So again, people are paying more attention. They're more interactive. More impressions per game, 62% increase there. And of course, because it's an OTT app, you've got 100% insight to what people are actually doing and how they're interacting and how you may want to change things in the future. So from a business perspective, it's a technology that enables this kind of stuff, and it's been really successful. How does it all work? This is a very high-level diagram of what's really going on. But basically at the very left here, you've got your channel schedule. That may be which live games are actually going or what commercials you're going to play from in the left to right kind of model. That schedule will get pushed down to Evertz.io, which may generate the stream for the kind of the clean feed that I actually talked about. Then you've got your statistical database that all gets pushed to the cloud. And then, there's HTML5 graphics. There's things about the event and the stats and the metadata. That gets pushed from S3 and using a CDN to your connected device where the graphics get actually rendered. And then the insights go back to the cloud and then can feed back into your data store as well. So it's kind of a very long loop there, but the cloud is very much a part of that, because what you want to do is you want to scale out the data streams and the connected users using the cloud technology to scale up from 100 users to 1 million users or whatever else it is. In days gone by, you wouldn't be able to do that very easily unless you had built the church for Easter Sunday and could handle top load. Well, that's okay, but it's kind of expensive. With the cloud, this stuff can scale up and scale down based on the number of users. It'd be more cost effective that way. So yeah, that's just a very quick summary. I know we're probably over time. Very quick summary of kind of what we're doing on the right to left kind of side to personalize and customize those streams using some of this technology. So a couple questions. Sure, go ahead.
It's fantastic. She's got a few questions. You guys said yes?
Correct.
Wow, it's great. I've seen it only in Google Images, so it's nice to see it live. Couple questions. The pitch stuff, where you're doing, like, how is that? How does that happen? Someone's in there with an iPad?
That's actually done way up front at the stadium. That metadata that then it's transported down using ID3 time metadata tags to feed the downstream systems.
Oh, so it's just, you're just getting the feed in.
Correct. We're not making the decision. The metadata is coming in and being generated upstream. But again, we time align it with the actual video because there is latency in the overall signal path. So time aligning those things is really key.
Actually, one of the hats that I play in real life is I'm a designer. And I was just curious, like, how do you work with a yes? Like, it could have been really bad, what you see on the screen, but it seems to be pretty good. Like, how did that go about? I know you can't compress like 2 years into like 30 seconds of explanation.
In terms of how does the engagement work and the business model work? And
no, like, how did you come up with, this is what we're going to present to the customer, on the screen? Comes from an idea to what we
sure.
see now.
No, actually, there's a whole technology suite that allows us to customize the screens and the graphics that actually do get presented. So there's a templating tool
Okay.
that says, I want to present this kind of information in this section tied to this incoming metadata here, and you arrange things on the screen. But it's very much just like the solutions team at Evertz and the mediator at the Evertz IO space. There's a solutioning process that happens with the customer and probably the product owner. So I want to present this kind of stuff. I want to engage my fans in that kind of way.
Ah, okay.
And so we collaboratively design those templates and what's going to get shown on the screen together with them. And it's not a long process, but it's definitely an exploration together. How do I want to make my product better? And from that come from the business side, the product owner side at Yes. And then we actually put in the tech stack to actually make that happen.
Thank you.
And I think there was one question behind you. Yeah, sorry.
So I was just going to ask sort of similar question, but it's sort of two-parter. Like how do you decide? You must decide with the content owner what's going to be made available in terms of, you know, that list that you showed early on, you know, like betting and all that stuff.
Yep.
And then the second part of the question is, it seems like some of that content those decisions would have to be made almost real time, live-ish in a control room where you're saying, you know, you just have an extra target now.
Yep,
Is that
absolutely.
correct?
So there's actually, again, because there's this templating process and this business process, agreeing on kind of what you want to present on the screen. And we've kind of broken it up sometimes into, if you're doing an NBA or a basketball game, here's the kind of stuff that we've done with other customers that is presented as a base package to help them with their decision-making process. Then there's a soccer package that we go, you know what, typically these guys want to see this kind of stuff. And then there's a baseball one. So we've got themes that come out of that we build up. And then we use that as a starting point for the discussion. Oh, I want to tweak this. I want to try that. Can we do this? And do a little bit of that up front with the customer. So that's kind of how we present it. There's a huge stack of stuff that we've done, but in the end, we kind of present it as a theme for this kind of sport. And you had a two-parter.
Does it go all the way back to the control room then?
Some
where
of those
you're
things actually
designing
do
the
come.
workflow within the control room.
Yeah, sometimes there's custom integrations that actually are done for the specific team because they've got somebody doing that particular function, watching for steals or whatever else it is. Some of that stuff is generated at the stadium real time, and that's the only way you can actually get that stuff. Or it may come from a third party whose job is to generate that metadata off the stream and then integrate with you and push it downstream.
And Evertz does all that?
No, Evertz doesn't do all that stuff. We'd integrate with Sports Radar and companies like that to give us some of that information.
I see.
I have a question. Is other cloud providers that work with Evertz IO, or is just AWS, or you can work with other cloud providers?
We do a lot with AWS, and that's been actually, I think, in general for the market is kind of AWS centric right now, but by no means are we tied to AWS. We have things that are going on in Google and Azure as well, for sure. So multi-cloud I think is important for a lot of customers for some technical reasons and some business reasons, right? But in the end, when it comes to a SaaS, to a certain degree, it shouldn't matter, right? It's a software as a service. I could have this running in AWS, I could have this portion of the SaaS running in Google, this portion of the SaaS running in Azure, but that should be all abstracted because you're just consuming the service. So really where it is in terms of cloud is kind of abstracted in that particular case, but we've done work with Azure, we've done work with Google, with AWS, all of them.
Thank you.
And our last speaker is Sam Bogoch, CEO and co-founder of Axle AI. Sam is the CEO and co-founder of Axle AI Incorporated, the developers of the Axle Edit cloud-native collaborative tool, AI-powered MAM platform. Founded in 2012, the company has grown from 3 to 30 full-time staff and hundreds of customer sites worldwide. Previously, he managed workgroup software at Avid, a publicly held company. Okay. His background includes product management, marketing, startups, enterprise sales, as well as party promotion. Nice. He has a degree in physics from Harvard and an MD from Columbia University.
All right, so I want to kind of preface this with kind of where we are at in the video and broadcast industries, because it is a kind of amazing time. The amount of change that is happening and the speed at which it's happening are really unprecedented. And the last few years have in particular driven this, with the whole transition to COVID and then post-COVID. So here's one way of thinking about it. Before COVID, the industry was largely siloed and used centralized systems, right? We've all, I think, encountered these systems, big monolithic systems like Grass Valley or Avid, where basically everybody worked off of the central hardware and software. And COVID kind of blew that to bits. Suddenly everyone was working from home. Everyone was, getting up in their slippers and trying to figure things out remotely. And in many cases, and what we're learning now, visiting with the major studios and with many of the television sort of food chain components, is that they almost had to forget everything they'd learned and lose the systems that they built to go to these cloud-based workflows overnight. And today, people are kind of coming back to the office cautiously, but neither the old monolithic models nor the pure cloud models actually make sense in a hybrid environment. So that's what I'll be talking about today, is ways of thinking about it, ways of kind of pulling back a step, because we know that cloud can't solve everything. And we know that on-premise wasn't that great either. So now this is the problem that my company is trying to solve. We're basically making collaboration around video much easier, smoother, and kind of frictionless. And the fact is that there are estimated to be 1 million teams worldwide doing this kind of work by the end of the decade. So this has gotten way beyond traditional broadcast. It's in places like corporate, sports, universities, governments, political campaigns, you name it, churches. And each of them is like a mini broadcaster. Yes is a great example of that. So what we're seeing though is that every political campaign, many businesses, many churches are starting to look like broadcasters internally. The other big driver is that the content creation cycle has sped up unrecognizably. It used to be you'd have months to plan something out, you'd do a show, you'd do a promo, whatever it was. That came down to weeks. And then with social media, the turnaround time is measured in hours. So some of the presidential campaigns during America's last presidential election cycle were having to respond to kind of Twitter storms almost immediately, like within a few hours. They'd have to put up a video that made their point and so forth. That never used to happen. And it means you have to curate, edit, and push content much quicker than you would have to do in the past. So having said that, let me take a step back and talk about cloud, because there's a lot of hype. I think actually the Evertz guys did a great job of drilling down on some of these points. Where is it useful? Where is it not as useful, et cetera. But when you go to a trade show, oh my gosh, I was just at IBC, and everywhere you turned, it was like cloud. Of course, everybody wants to go to the cloud. It's going to be great. And there wasn't a whole lot of talk about what the potential downsides were, but they exist, of course. So everyone says, oh, your CapEx spending goes way down, but guess what? Your OpEx goes way up. And meanwhile, there's an aspect of the cloud, as you guys mentioned, AWS is like the 800-pound gorilla now. If you want to have all the ins and outs that you want, all the third parties available, you're going to be on AWS. But guess what? You're kind of trapped. Like you can't easily move from that cloud platform to another one today. Maybe over time, Google and Azure will, get to that level. But today, if you want a rich ecosystem, you're kind of stuck with AWS, and that's not a great place to be given how expensive they are. This is an interesting angle. Accountability is different with the cloud. Many IT people and many broadcast engineers view it as a way to kind of pass the buck, because it used to be you would maintain the servers. And if the server crashed, you get the phone call at 2 in the morning, fix the server, right? Now it's like, hey, AWS is down for a few hours. There's nothing I can do. Let's maybe move over to some other failover system we had, but it's no longer on you to maintain these systems, which is both a good and a bad thing. And so it's a lot easier to sort of say, hey, Frame.io is down, SoDC is down, but it'll be back up real soon because they're working hard on it. Now, I've talked about some of the negatives. Some of the big positives are the integrations are so much easier with this generation of technology. It's often a matter of just passing a glorified text file between these different products. Used to be you'd have to like write C code, and very few people were capable of doing that and maintaining that code. But now it's a simple webhook. You say, give me this, set up that feed, whatever it is, very dynamic, very powerful. Another aspect of this is that you don't have nearly as much hardware on site, but everyone, for instance, everyone says, oh, tape is so over. I'm done with tape. I'm not doing any more tape. Well, guess what? All of the deep archives provided by AWS and Microsoft and Google are in fact just big tape libraries. The only thing is you're outsourcing the management of that tape library to them, and you're paying a lot for it. So like Glacier is just a huge bank of tape libraries. And so anybody who thinks they got rid of tape by moving to the cloud missed something there. You're still using tape, but you're paying 2 or 3 times as much for other people to manage it for you because you can't be bothered. Another aspect, and this isn't really about the cloud, but it's more about remote work. There is collaboration, but it's still quite limited, right? There's nothing that beats being in a facility together. You can run down the hall, talk to the engineer, run down another hallway, talk to the editors and the producers. Now you got Slack and you've got some limited tools like Frame.io or the product that we're rolling out, Axel Edit, where you can actually get in and comment on the timeline of things. But that's still not the same as doing it in person. And there were real benefits and still are real benefits to an on-premise at the facility kind of environment. Now, there are some amazing use cases and actually, DR is one that I didn't call out here, but it absolutely is disaster recovery, but distribution. Some of the first and biggest adopters of cloud were people like Discovery and Netflix. Well, guess what? They're distribution companies, and their job is to take one master, transcode it 50 different ways, and forward it to 500 different channels, let's say. There's nothing better than the cloud for that because you don't want to make those people come to you, and you don't want to be pushing individual copies one-on-one to each of them through the pipes that you own. So the cloud is like amazing for this, and that's why you see so much activity in that area. Collaboration, anytime when a lot of people working at a lot of locations need to access the same material, fantastic stuff. And live events, anything where a feed needs to go from somewhere to somewhere else, cloud has amazing attributes in terms of uptime, guaranteed bandwidth, et cetera. Now, which cloud? And again, that's been touched on earlier, but basically the more you spend, the richer the ecosystem you get. So the top of the pyramid is AWS. Google and Azure are similarly priced, but not quite the same level of breadth yet. But what's been interesting the last few years is that there's some more affordable options. For instance, there's cloud storage now at a fraction of the cost of Amazon's, but still code compatible from people like Seagate Live, Wasabi, and Backblaze. And at a third the price, it's actually a very interesting proposition. But again, you lose all that rich ecosystem stuff. So you have to balance it out. Maybe you park things there, maybe you have your long-term archive there, rather than give it to the big expensive guys. And then the next level down from that is maybe not even the cloud at all, but more like a private hosted scenario where you run your own servers, but you run them physically away from your facility, and you pay someone to either give you bare metal servers or virtual machines. But then you have to be doing a lot more work, obviously, to maintain and configure those. Still, it's kind of a sliding scale on cost. And at the low end, it can be very affordable. At the high end, it's like, watch out for your wallet. So just a couple of examples, and then I'll wrap up for Q&A. Like we have customers like music festivals, Coachella, for instance. They have petabytes of content that they've accumulated over the history of the festival. Not exactly what you'd think of as a broadcaster, but they're getting more and more into the real-time content business, into the repurposing business. So a huge amount of activity at things like venues, and churches are the same way, especially during COVID. They amassed a lot of 1080 and even 4K footage. I just visited one church and they have 4 petabytes of fairly recent footage in most cases. And it's growing by leaps and bounds. These are some of our customers, you know, and again, it's quite diverse. A few broadcasters in there. We've done some very big broadcast sites, but the majority are not broadcasters in the traditional sense. And this is Axel Edit. I encourage everyone to take a look if you get the chance. It's basically a MAM with integrated browser-based editorial, and you can collaborate on the timeline. And there are a number of different modules to what we do. And it's, you know, the team obviously comes out of this industry. So we just think it's an amazing time of change, and that the vendors that are in a position to help accelerate that change and help manage it for customers are going to have a really interesting time the next few years. But also, I think for customers, it's an amazing time of choice because you still have the on-premise options that you had in years past. Many of them may be legacy, but a lot of this agility that's being engineered in for the cloud also applies to private clouds and on-prem. So that's it. Thanks very much. And questions, welcome. Yes. Oh, sorry, I'm right here.
I see your domain is AI, so it got me thinking about maybe some of the other kind of AI related things that you may be offering, such as real-time transcription, real-time translation, real-time optical character recognition, kind of development, I guess you could say, image processing, right?
Yeah.
Deep image processing. Is that something that's part of your platform?
It is. So we have some of our own machine learning engines to do things like OCR, face recognition, object recognition, logos, and as you mentioned, transcription. The interesting thing there is it's another area where the cloud can be tricky because the large cloud vendors have those engines, but they charge in the neighborhood of $10 an hour for processing. Now, for finished material that makes it to air, that's totally reasonable. But a lot of our customers are things like reality shows or churches, and that's not high value material, and they have thousands of hours of it. And there, $10 an hour is actually not that cost effective. So what we've been able to do is provide runtimes that you can just run on virtual machines. And instead of charging you per hour of the footage that you're processing, we just charge a flat rate per month. Not because like cost is the only driver, but what we've seen with proofs of concept using Amazon's recognition, for instance, is that people will try it, but then when they do the math about what it really costs to apply across their whole archive, they kind of call time out. They say, well, we'll come back in a few years when it's better and cheaper.
So you can do closed captioning in multiple languages kind of on the fly, or is that something
Well,
done
closed
offline?
captioning is strong. The kind of a transcription we do is not accurate enough for on-air closed captioning work. It's kind of 90% accurate, which sounds good until you realize that every 10 words there's a mistake. So, so it's good enough to be searching the content. Like if you're looking for all the time someone mentions Obama or Chevrolet or whatever, you're fine. But if you really expect to put it on the screen and not have any embarrassing goofs, it needs more work. We do have a little tool that lets you tweak those, but there are companies that supply proper captioning. It's just significantly more expensive.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, one more.
That was great. Thank you. I know on like the web development side, enterprise software development side, there's a lot of like collaborative tools like Figma and Miro, whiteboarding.
Yep.
have you seen, seems like you're out there, you know, seeing a lot of stuff. Have you seen any of that sort of stuff with video, and what does that look like creating? TV?
There's a new wave of editing software, and we're part of it, but some of them are really trying to take very different approaches. For instance, there's one called Descript, which is text-driven editing. So it basically makes a transcript, and then you don't have to be a craft editor. You can just edit off the transcript and say, I want to grab this piece and cut away to that next piece. And it tries to figure out for you how to put that. So it's an attempt to make editing a little bit more for lay people. Very, very successful in the podcast and blogging world, as you might imagine, because there's just talking heads. And, if you want to splice something out, it's the easiest way to do it. There are certainly others though. There's one called Imaginario, for instance, has some cool effects and stuff. There's another one called Kapwing, Kapwing. So there's probably 15 of these browser-based editors right now, and some of them are taking very unorthodox approaches to, none of them looks like Avid, right? They're all like winging it, like bright colors and big buttons. How many serious editors are going to take that approach? I don't know, but it is an interesting time. All right, thanks very much.
We're on our last speaker, Roger Bijos from Data Miner. Roger has been active in technology and telecommunication industry from the early 90s, graduated in industrial and telecommunications engineering, and held technical and pre-sales positions in satellite, test and measurement, and late software system solutions before moving into sales management for the past 10 years, leading Skyline America's growth. Excellence in customer focus, long-term partnerships, fiscal austerity, and a drive to provide enabling digital transformation technology while making business sense has been the purpose and guidance of his for the past decade.
Okay, so it turned out that Peter wasn't the last one on the last one. But don't worry, you only have 45 slides, about 3 minutes per slide, so we'll be out of here in the time. Let me put the timer. Okay, a lot of the, I want to talk about orchestration on the cloud, on the ground, and the foundations of it. Hopefully by the end, you can check out what Data Miner is and how we do things, but I want to keep on the foundation on the technology itself. All right. And talk first and foremost, talk about, most of you may not know who we are. We've been in this space for about, we've been around since 1984 and Data Miner since the early 2000s. And the platform has grown organically over the past 20 years. And started off on the media, on the broadcast side, but right now I think we are all becoming more IT. There was a lot of concepts from the previous speakers that I share deeply, right? And I'm going to start with that. All right. So we talked about, let's talk about infrastructure. Doesn't matter where your infrastructure is on premise, if you have legacy or if you have cloud pure software based. All right, you still have to have servers and routers and switches and systems with functions. So I like to talk about functions. In the past, you had a purpose-built either receiver and encoder or switcher, whatever you had it. And now what you have is a set of software that sits somewhere, either on the ground or on the cloud. And what you have is a set of APIs. What you have is a set of functions. So I like to talk about that because it doesn't matter what you have. Anybody can buy infrastructure. But what do you do with that infrastructure? How you stitch that together that enables your teams to do what is called process automation. And process automation can be many things to many people, depending on what you want to achieve. But the first thing that you want to achieve is, hey, I need to have some sort of visibility into that. How can I tie up into that infrastructure? And then, okay, how can I append metadata? How can I append auxiliary sources of data? Where the data resides? When do I have multiple sources of data? But in order to facilitate doing what I like to call the Uber of the rest of the industry, all right? They didn't have any cars. They didn't have any drivers, a maintenance plan or anything like that. What they have is a really good set of APIs and an idea that empower users and customers to come together. It's an enabling platform. So having said that, right, you have, and we all have, a limited amount of energy and time, all right? So having the first division, the enabling technology, the people in the process to do so, and those are the three pillars that we really need to think about. Is what takes us to the next step. Right? That is really doesn't matter what's the underlying technology. It doesn't matter if it is on the ground, on the cloud. How can I stitch my capacities and capabilities together to provide a solution for the multiple and various teams that I have? So the very first one, and the very first part of it is what I like to call the digital twin, and it's kind of in green there. All right. When you're tapping into a resource, and I don't care what the resource is, that resource may be a host, the host that have VMs, have containers, or it can be just a set of APIs that you get on the cloud. You know, at the end of the day, what you have, what you need to have is your digital twin, right? And the digital twin is a software representation of the capacity and capabilities that you have, all right? And that has to be transparent. So once you have that, and this is another way of looking at that. Now, if you have, let me see the mouse over here. If you have things on the ground or on the cloud, right, and to be able to extract those functions and to be able to have the a single secured connection to the cloud in order to do the collaboration, in order to bring in the functions that you need to bring in order to append the metadata, in order to do provision and discovery. You know, once you get to that point, all right, you find out that in reality, what we're referring to in the new brave world is a set of virtual functions, is a set of functionalities. Do I need a scheduling system? Yes or no? Do I need a service template? Yes or no? Is that, how do I put together the service template in a way that I don't need to do code? I can simply drag and drop my functions and connect them together and let the system dictate what are my capacities and capabilities regardless of the manufacturer make model. All right. What am I going to do? Am I going to do a contribution or distribution feed? All right. Okay. So I need to get my source. I need to get my destinations. I need to get my profiles and where I'm going to run all that. So that's a very easy, intuitive way of providing your teams with their apps. Now, nowadays, everybody have their apps, right? So this is the point where you build within your organization the ability to build your own apps without having to go down to the code level, all right? And with that multiple set of functions, and there's a myriad of set of functions, not all of them needs to reside within this ecosystem. This is a free world. It's a brave new world. The example that I like to give is, if you need something that has to provision a part of your network or part of something that runs on the cloud, and your IT team already have that in another completely different automation called, let's say, Ansible, which is very well known in the industry. And from within your process, your low code apps, the way we like to talk about it, you simply can send a command, right, which is the set of APIs. You can have your webhooks, you can have your usable defined APIs. You simply send one command, all right, say, do your process and give me the result. So I can keep on going on doing what I need to, and provision what I need to provision. So it breaks down into how this is done. What is this? And I'm going to just go in and put everything together. So a lot of times when you need to do, when you need to provide if it is a stadium, if it is a sports event or whatever it is, you have phases in there. So you can have something called resource scheduling. That resource scheduling can reside within or without, as long as you have the API. Now it can reside on SharePoint, can reside on an email, it can be on other, or it can be purely a low code app that you do. And you say, okay, I need this game that runs on this stadium. Do I need to send a fly pack? Do I need to send a truck? Am I going to get a truck from a third party? So right there and then you can have a portal that says, well, I need to receive that content from that stadium, and I'm going to distribute, or going to hand off to one or many customers on one or many formats. So that can be done by simply saying, this is what I need, and hand that off to other systems, to any other one of our partners. And then it can come back and say, well, do I need to load a profile in there? Can I do that manually? Do I need an approval process? Do I need a cost? Do I need to send a crew? And what are the people available? Right. So all those things is part of what we call the resource orchestration, because you can append that metadata on the resource either manually or automatically. Right. And the very last part of it is whenever you can do that, you can send the profile, whenever you can have those virtualized functions on premise or on the cloud. You can then provision the service end to end. Doesn't have to be with, again, 100% on data miner. You can simply make those API calls for other systems to do their part, their piece part, but at least you have the process being managed from a single location. It's a huge advantage in terms of savings, in terms of time to market, in terms of being able to provide new business models. And I am running out of time. This is just about the same thing, but what makes sense, right? If you have repetitive work or repetitive processes, this makes a lot more sense than if you have ad hoc. If you had ad hoc, man in the middle is always going to be a cost reduction, as a matter of fact. All right. But the point being is, once you can have those virtual functions and load those profiles and have that metadata appended to that, that's when you can put your automation scripts, engines, or subsystems in there in order to get to the process automation. All right. So a lot of that is fundamental. All right. If you are to be independent on the technology, that you are the technology provider, on your cloud provider, and future-proof your process on the technology changes and the technology cycles that are faster. They're just moving faster and faster. All right, and a very simple case, and I don't want to get into data miner. This is more technology talk. A very simple case is, I need to, I'm going to do a basketball game or a volleyball game. Okay, do I need to spin that ecosystem on a cloud? Yes or no? I can use Terraform to do that, or I can have the Terraform in another automation, but I can call that in. But even before doing that, I need to schedule that. I need to assign people to that. I need to assign a cost to that, and so on and so forth. So if you need to, the first process is spinning the ecosystem, and then spinning the, or turning up, I should say, the technology that you're going to use. Are you going to use ROS? Are you going to use Evertz? You're going to use Grass Valley? Or you're going to, whatever you're going to use? Are you going to have an intercom in that? Yes or no? So when you bring that all together, now you have all those functions that you can load your templates and your profiles, and off you go. So those are the process independency that you can achieve by doing so. There's actually one example that I like very, very much, which illustrates all that. One of our longtime customers had a distribution network which was satellite based, and as time evolved, they put part of that on a cloud, but they definitely went for a terrestrial distribution. And they have over 200 affiliates. And the workflow there was the producers would ask in the media asset manager for assets. All right, the system would get that and distribute to the affiliates as needed. Literally, because that system, the whole process was built within virtual functions and independent of the underlying technology. When they kill off the birds and went completely terrestrial, they were able to do that, and that's key. They were able to do that. We're just the technology providers, the technology enablers. They were able to do that within 30 days. It was 15 days of tweaking the scripts, the automations, because they went from a whole satellite allocation to terrestrial redundant MPLS. And within 30 days, they were up and running. All right, so the process itself, the business need itself didn't change that much, but the underlying technology did. All right, and that's how we help our customers. We help our customers help themselves because they know the process and they have the people to do that. All right. A little bit on, I'm just going to, due to time, I'm going to probably brush through the first and the second one. The first one, it's more about this whole process, right? This is a customer that has a portal. You can ask your services through the portal. And by the way, when I talk about a portal, it's something that you can build by dragging and dropping your fields in there. Those fields may have object modeling, which is just a way to say they have checks and balances in the back. And then it trickles down multiple workflows or orchestration. One of them is a satellite ingest. The other one is actually a terrestrial ingest. They make it redundant of each other, and then it gets pushed out to 4 platforms like OTT and YouTube and other platforms. So this is the type of workflow that we can build in pieces, that you guys can build actually in pieces and parts. And there's a lot of that data that resides within the operations. And the second one, let me see if I can just click that through. Do I have internet here? All right. Somewhere in there. Oh, it's here. All right. So this is something that that we've done. So in this particular case, this customer had the suite of GV amp and RTS intercom. But the workflow here is quite simple. All right. And this is what I'm referring to about the low code apps. This is just a reservation within within what you need to do. Hey, I need something to happen. I need to do a reservation and I want to reserve resources. Those resources can be reserved up front or it can be free running. Because the virtual functions, that their capability and their capacity, we keep track of those. So you can say, hey, I'm going to do a game. That game is on draft stage from this time to this time. Now, a lot of those, let me see here. A lot of those processes, you can do that ad hoc. You can do that in bulk. And then you can append metadata. So where it's going to be, what kind of profile do I want to use? And I think our friends from Evertz said, "Oh, am I going to? Is this something that I have done before? I have a template, it's cookie cutter, and I'm ready to go." All right. But ultimately, it goes to an approval process because when something is on draft, all right, it might have a approval process for whatever reason. You might append cost in there. You might append who is going to be responsible for that event, yes or no. So this is part of the process in itself. But what it boils down to is that as you go through in this particular environment, what you have, even though this is the screenshot of the manufacturer, right? What you see, and there's a video for that, is the video takes about 10 minutes. I'm not going to play it now. I highly encourage to go to that link. So you guys can watch. But basically, what happens on the background is as things gets approved, these are the virtual functions that are virtualized. We have those API calls for. And it simply goes from, you start turning up those playbooks. And as you turn up those playbooks, you can see, hey, I have selected the feed. I have selected the video feed in there. All right, then it's going to go in, it's going to start provisioning. You're going to see the switching from the bottom up there, and you see the video going through it. So you have that touch and feel that everything is going on, and at the end, what you have as an operator, what you have as a control plane in there is that, hey, now it is running, everything is good. I can even have that particular service monitored, which is another benefit of that. You can stitch together all those KPIs and have a monitoring flow. And at the end, and I believe some of our colleagues here, so what that process allows you to do is after it's ended, after it's good night, and you have the successful completion of that, it completely turns down not only the resource, but also you can turn down the infrastructure. But a system is not only made of that particular, this particular vendor. In this case, it also goes in and gets the and provisions the intercom. All right. So this is, in this particular case, both of them were running on AWS. So it also spins up the intercom and it selects the what's going to be the operator. All right. So and at the end, what you have is a database with absolutely all the events that happen. And you can dice and slice that from which customers it was sent to, how much it cost, and so on and so forth. But more important than that is all that information is also available through webhooks, through APIs. So if the financial folks want, hey, what did you do? How many events did you do with that particular customer at what rate? Right? It doesn't have to have an integration. It's simply, okay, that's the information that you need. All right, here, that's the API call. And it doesn't matter if on the other side you're using SAP, using Salesforce, or whatever you're using, right? It's just an API call. All right, so in a nutshell, let me go back to the presentation. In a nutshell, am I here? Okay, I am here. In a nutshell, that's how we bring value to our customers. This is very, very much driven by you. We're very much community driven. Anything and everything that you saw here and the same certification and training and SDKs that our guys use is completely open. All of our training is completely free. It's completely available. And even our roadmap is driven by the users. I don't think there's another way to evolve because nobody can know everything. I have surpassed my allowed time, but I can do this for a very, very long time. Questions? Yes.
2 years ago, I was working for G-Tech, and they were showing a VPN-based orchestrator on the FIMS initiative. And my question is, are you using, FIMS was sort of something that would allow best of breed orchestration systems across multiple vendors.
Mm-hmm.
And you've mentioned numerous times about your system being open.
Yep.
And with the various APIs, and I'm curious what it's based on. Is it standards based or is it your own proprietary system?
There's nothing proprietary in DataMiner. The way it is done goes back to the digital twin. All right. The digital twin, breaking it down into the bare bones technology, is nothing more than markup language. It's actually XML. All right, we have an SDK for it. You don't need it. You can open Notepad, any XML editor in there. And why did we do it that way? Because it's a markup language. So it really doesn't matter what you traverse down the wire, right? If you're talking about serial connections, if you're talking about SNMP connection, if you're talking about ingesting Kafka streams or any log files, or if you're talking about complex APIs or JSON or whatever it is, we make what that allows you to do is make that software representation of the source of information. Does that make sense? Because once you have that, the rest of it, you can use, we have an automation engine in there, but you can use our automation engine, you can use his automation engine, you can do whatever it is. Right? Where we're really, really strong is that anything and everything that we ingest in DataMiner, we have a common API out to the world. So do we have to be the orchestrator of orchestrators? No, we can be part of it. You can have another orchestration system where DataMiner is just a piece part of it, but we expose a known, well-documented API, so you can do whatever you need to do in a most cost-effective manner.
Roger, I've got one more question from you or for you from the remote audience. And the question is, can you pick and choose modules according to my workflow with one API, or do I have to purchase the full complement of DM applications?
No, we have packages, but we have also subscription where you get everything with a little bit of everything. And the more you consume of something that makes sense to you. And it's so in other words, if you're heavy on user interfaces, you don't need to get all the full stack package. So actually the business model can be tailored to what you need. But one of the things that I highly recommend is if whatever you have, start off with the basic package which you have everything, so at least you know what's available for you, what works best for you. So no, the short answer is no, you don't have to get the full stack.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to swap. I'm going to give you the mic because there's another question, but it's a general questions. Sure. And since I'm going to be up here for a bit.
Absolutely. I'm going to stop this. I actually went 10 minutes over. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. So the general question here is, some organizations require any cloud-based storage solutions to be located in Canada. So some corporation broadcasters want their storage in Canada.
Okay.
Does the services guarantee Canadian servers, like your service or Sam, your service? Just so everybody remotely knows, the Everts gentlemen have left, so I can't ask them the question.
Okay. We are completely hardware and cloud agnostic. Of course, we do have, let's say, our databases, the databases that we run on, which is Elastic and Cassandra. We prefer Ubuntu, Linux Ubuntu, but it doesn't have to be. Right? Those are the ones that that we have most of our deployments. But if you have a requirement that to be run on another, on a Microsoft, for Cassandra or whatever it is, well, that's going to be deprecated in a few years, but it's another story. Yeah, it can work there. It just takes a little bit longer to get it up and running, but not a problem at all. So location agnostic, it's cloud agnostic and vendor agnostic, I think, no, I can guarantee you that. That's our claim to fame.
Yeah, I would say something similar. Our products talk to standard APIs. We have found that there are a few platforms like Amazon S3 or Seagate Live Cloud that a larger number of our customers gravitate towards, but we've done a lot of work with their competitors. So Google, Wasabi in the case of archival storage, and Backblaze. So in general, anything that, now to the question about regional support, each of those vendors has a different strategy in terms of regional centers and centers outside the US. They all have something outside the US, but whether they have the facilities that you're looking for in Canada is probably worth, checking with the vendors about.
Cool. Anything else before we wrap that portion up? Okay. Just a couple of house cleaning things that I'd like to do is, again, tonight's recording, which will be slightly cleaned up. Thank you, Peter, with all of the gaps. And if you watch it on YouTube, you won't know that we had technical difficulties. So yeah, it'll be there. Future meetings, we have decided that the November the 8th, we had the board meeting earlier before this meeting, is on mirrorless cameras and lighting, LED lighting. It'll be here on November the 8th. December the 13th is going to be network operations, multicast flow management. It'll be here as well. January, we don't know yet, and February is going to be student focused. So we try and find out from the students what their interests or what their interest levels are and where they want us to present. And then we will present. And it's not to suggest that we just want students to come. We want members to come as well, because the big component of this is we want networking. We want the students to talk to us old folk, SMPTE members, and, just kind of share why SMPTE is worth joining and all that stuff. So that's the whole focus of that meeting. A couple of other things. SMPTE has their fall conference on the 27th or 24th to the 27th. There's a link down below, and I'm sure you've been, if you're a SMPTE member, you've got quite a few emails to this effect that this is happening. So if you want to take a picture, there's a QR code there as well. Good, Rob? Got it. Next up is Profusion is November 9th and the 10th at the Metro Convention Center. And we have a booth there. They encourage organizations like ourselves to be at the show. There's the link down below to register. It's a free register. So it's a great show to come and see. It's got everything to do with prosumer cameras and things of that nature. So it's definitely worthwhile. We are CSC and ourselves are back to back. We're beside Roscoe, and I believe Red Cameras is in the same group. And we're still working on this. This is the year that we're going to have a technical conference. That will be in June, but the makeup of what that is and what the theme is going to be, we are still in the early stages of trying to figure that stuff out. Here's some up-to-date information. Again, our website, if you want to become a friend and get meeting notices. If you're not a member, that's the URL you go to. I was doing some YouTube stuff earlier today, and that's our YouTube section, Toronto section YouTube channel. The first video was uploaded February the 14th, or sorry, February, I think it was the 14th, but 2014. And the topic was putting the E in SMPTE. Paul Briscoe was the chair at that time, and I believe Randy Conrad was the governor at that time. And there's 115 videos up there. So I did some math. If you watch 3 a night, you're going to be good all winter with just geeking out on SMPTE meetings. Before I put the last slide up, 2 things. Apologize again for the mishap earlier. We know that this hybrid thing is a part of our DNA going forward, because even tonight we had 21 people register for in-house, and we had 40 people register from out-of-house. So there's a lot of people still interested in watching us virtually. So we know that we have to do both. The makeup of that and how we orchestrate with the Ryerson gear and all that stuff, we just have to figure out. So, and it's been a while since we've been here, and maybe we should have done a session before with ourselves before we came online, but we'll get it together, we'll get it working. So there's no issue there. The question I do have is the pizzas. And I know that we're doing the individual boxes because of COVID and all that stuff. Does everybody feel comfortable if we go back to the bigger boxes, or do you want individuals still? Bigger boxes is fine? Okay, cool. Because there is quite a cost increase when you individualize. And I think that is it. I think this is a wrap. One thing that we are thinking about doing, we want to send out a kind of a survey. Couple of things. Are we doing the right thing? What meetings, topics do you want us to talk about? Are you getting too many emails from us? You know, just a whole bunch of things. So we're going to package a couple of questionnaires or questions and send you off an email just saying, hey, can you, I know there's a lot of people that send you emails going like, can you give us your comments and things of that nature. I just did one today of the Royal Bank, and I'm going like, well, I haven't done one in a while. So, but then you realize how far you get into they ask you a question, but then there's 3 because you answered it this way. And then you're there for another 10 minutes. So we won't do that. We'll just have a stack of maybe 10, 12, 14 questions, and you'll see them all at once, so you can kind of answer them at your will. So anyway, I again, thank you for showing up and being part of this. And I thank the presenters and I thank Evertz for sponsoring tonight. So thank you.